Simon, is that you? Oh my God. I'm inclined to agree with you, Mr. Otis. One size is indeed improving the economy. However, we must be careful. We don't want any of these up-and-coming young scientists to make too much money by making use of it. Why, what if one day everyone decided they would like a step up on the ladder? That simply cannot be allowed to happen, for the class system is here for a reason, and it simply must stay.
You make a very valid point, Canterville. Very valid indeed. I mean, take a look at the state of affairs we have in America. It's every man for himself out there.
This is exactly what I'm saying, where every man and his goldfish has a new invention these days. Take Tesla, for example.
Tesla? The boy who can make sparks fly? Yes, I believe we can all spark up a room if we try hard enough. I'm afraid the man's a fool. To believe he stands a chance to get Edison when it's perfectly ludicrous.
So you say that, Hiram?
Mr. Otis, please. I am not of the opinion that forenames should be used offhandedly during conversation. No, in fact, I feel they should be used as minimally as possible. If I could get my wife to address me as Mr. Otis, then I most certainly would.
My apologies, Mr. Otis. I did not know you had such strong ideas on the matter. In any case, I believe Tesla will rise above Edison. He simply seems to have more vigor in him.
Oh, that's ludicrous.
Clearly, we both have different opinions on modern science.
Evidently. In fact, I imagine you are one of those fools who hasn't studied Darwin's latest masterpiece. Now there is a true genius.
You cannot be talking about that abysmal book on his preposterous theory of evolution.
Lady Canterville, I do not wish to debate you on ideas that are beyond a doubt above your comprehension. The book is legendary. I have no doubt it inspire a great many minds in the future.
No, Mr. Otis, it will be flushed out soon enough. To think that we, a far more superior and intelligent race, could have evolved from those things.
I do not wish to talk to you on this subject anymore, Lady Canterville, so I state that this will be the end of it, and no more will be said on the matter.
In my mind, you are quite clearly wrong, but I see there is no use in debating it. It seems as this modern world, along with your ways of science, are moving in a chaotic pace that I cannot keep up with, in a direction that is most absurdly wrong.
It is true, my lady, that having to adapt to this new, exciting world is indeed an arduous task.
Yes, perhaps it is best left to the young and energetic, which is their world they're building, and therefore must live in it. Why, perhaps it's time for the old and unchangeable to indeed die out.
Do not talk of yourself that way, Lady Canterville. There's absolutely no need. Besides, whenever someone mentions death, I always fear they're fishing for the slightest drop of sympathy. I myself am not much of a sympathetic man. I doubt I could spare even a single teardrop of your story, my lady, and for that, I am sorry.
Think nothing of it, Mr. Otis. If I wanted sympathy, you would not be the first man I approached for it. Wonderful. Would you care for some, Mr. Otis?
I suppose it would be rude to refuse when in England. 3 sugars, please. I find that tea is rather a distasteful drink tea. The more sugar added, the less you're aware of the positively dreadful taste.
It is not a major concern to me. If you do not wish for tea, I will not give you tea.
No, it is traditional that whenever I'm here, in England, I try to have at least 1 cup a day. Purely so I can experience the culture.
That is perfectly preposterous. But if it is what you wish, I will not debate the matter. Mrs. Umney, 3 sugars for Mr. Otis, please.
Thank you.
Indeed, I should introduce you both. Mrs. Umney will be spending a lot more time with you.
Pleasure to meet you, Miss Umney. And why is that, Lady Canterville?
Oh, why Mrs. Umney has expressed a desire to continue on her services here at Canterville Chase. I trust this will not be an issue for you.
I'm sorry. I have houseworkers of my own which I'd much prefer to move in with me. It seems this manor has come in with an unexpected amount of unnecessary baggage.
Mrs. Umney is a hard-working lady. I can assure that she will not let you down.
And what do you propose I pay Miss Umney here for her services?
Only the very reasonable cost of £45 a year. I do not think this will be a problem for you.
Only £45 a year? Oh, why, that's extortionate! I refuse to pay such a large amount of money for someone whose capabilities I know very little about. I am willing to pay £30 and no more. Even that, I feel, is beyond the amount of being reasonable.
I feel inclined to remind you, Mr. Otis, that this house that you've clearly grown so very fond of still belongs to me. I am willing to lower Mrs. Umney's wages to a very reasonable amount of £40 a year.
I am willing to pay £30 a year. If you wish to raise Miss Umney's rates any higher, then I suggest you produce your wallet and scrape up what little money you do have left to top up your wages yourself.
Very well. It is settled. Thank you, Mrs. Umney.
A very intricate design, Lady Canterville. It must be, what, at least a good 50 years of age?
Oh, 74, in fact. It was purchased by my grandfather in town. He was very much delighted by it up until the day he died, which unfortunately was soon after. But it is something to remember him by. We love it.
I assume then that you'll be taking it with you after the transaction?
No. Could you imagine hauling that to a new place? Well, in the past it may have been suitable for me to pay somebody else to do that, but as you have made clear, that option no longer remains open to me.
I see.
I do hope you will take care of it. It is approaching its 75th anniversary, and I dare say it requires a celebration, perhaps even a new clock face.
Not to worry, my lady. I will most certainly take good care of this old antique. You see, my daughter, Virginia, she loves old antiques, you see. I'll leave the duty to her, and there'll be no doubt it'll be in pristine condition for at least another 50 years.
That is excellent to hear, Minister.
Shall we get down to the matter at hand, Canterville? I fear I spent much too long beating about the bush. And you are quite right in saying I am fond of the place. It is a superlative home with just the perfect amount of authentic British design.
That is excellent to hear.
But please do not think this an opportunity to swindle or manipulate me. I am well aware of how much I feel this homely manor is worth, and I have no wish nor intention of going about it.
Why, of course, Minister. What then do you suppose I charge you for such a magnificent property?
I would suggest a substantial amount of £2,000.
£2,000? Ludicrous! Whatever strange and mystifying ideas of money you have in America, I can assure you we do not have them here. To think that £2,000 is appropriate, why, they must be handing out palaces left, right and centre over there.
I feel that £2,000 is a perfectly reasonable amount.
Why, of course you do, for afterwards your pockets would still be brimming, and I would not be left with enough for tomorrow's turkey.
I'd be happy to expressly ship a turkey straight to you.
I'm going to state this quite clearly, that if you suggest a number as low as that again, these negotiations will come to an abrupt end, and I will be left sipping my tea here alone.
Very well. If you insist in making this difficult, I am willing to pay £2,500. That I will go no higher, however.
That is a more satisfactory amount, although I'm ashamed to say this, that your inability to perform an acceptable payment is becoming rather a bore. I would accept no less than £3,000.
It appears we have hit a standstill, and I do, to be honest with you, I do love standstills. I feel obliged to remind you, Lady Canterville, that, well, you wish to sell this manor. I am merely a means of how, and lest we forget the rather unfortunate reason of why selling this chase is so important to you.
£2,800.
I'm willing to pay £2,600. That'll be my final offer, however.
Very well. £2,600 will suffice. I will sort the necessary papers so you can move in Monday. Would you care for one, Mr. Otis?
Oh, I would very much appreciate one, for whiskey is indeed a fine drink. It shows that one is sophisticated and well above the lower classes. I myself have been a true fan of Scotch for many years, since I was a boy, perhaps. You know, Lady Canterville, I must say I'm terribly glad this all being sorted. I've been looking to have a home in England for quite some time now, and this place is just, well, it certainly suits and possibly even exceeds my needs.
I'm glad you like it, Mr. Otis. I was sure you would. Although I feel it is my duty, though it is quite an embarrassment to bring it up now. To mention the unfortunate business of, the ghost.
The ghost? What nonsense are you speaking of now?
Well, you see, we have not dared to live in this place for many years, ever since my grand aunt, the Dowager Duchess of Bolton, was frightened into a fit from which she never truly recovered. The whole ordeal was, in fact, caused by a pair of ghostly hands placing herself on her shoulders as she was dressing for dinner. The ghost has been seen by many members of my family, including the rector of the parish, the Reverend Augustus Dampier of King's College, Cambridge. After the unfortunate business with the Duchess, none of our younger staff cared to live with us anymore, and Mr. Canterville often got very little sleep at night, in accordance with noise coming from the corridor and the library.
My lady, I will take the ghost at evaluation. I have come from a modern country where money can buy us everything we need, and we'll let spry young actors carrying off your best prima donnas and painting the old world red. If there were such a thing as a ghost in Europe, we'd have it at home in a very short amount of time, in a public museum or on the road as a show.
I fear that the ghost may have resisted the enterprisingness of your impresarios. It has been a well-known fact that for 3 centuries, since 1584, and always seems to appear before a family member, just before their untimely death.
So does the family doctor, for that matter, Canterville. But, my lady, there is no such thing as a ghost, and I'm guessing the laws of nature are not going to be suspended for the British aristocracy.
You are certainly very natural to America, but it is all right. If you do not mind a ghost, then it is fine. Although you must remember that I warned you. Oh, wow! Isn't it beautiful, Mother? Why, look at these walls. Such delicate designs, wouldn't you agree? Oh, and this table.
Pretty engravings it has. This one here shows a lion. I do love lions. They do not scare me, for I know if I ever was to meet one, we'd promptly become friends. Oh my goodness, look at this door, Mother. So much care and devotion must have been put into it to make it look as elegant as it does. Wouldn't you agree? These etchings inside it, aren't they immaculate? Why is that a painting? So mystifying, so eerie, so all of them are looking at us at once. As though we're being watched. And then natural thought, surely it's going to be quite a chill. Oh, I feel as though I can lie upon here for days on end, which no doubt I will do each day after I finish my studying. I do love it here, Mother. Isn't it beautiful? Yes, dear, it's very nice. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. In fact, that was my very first thought as soon as we stepped in. Was yours the same?
I regret veritably to say it was not, my dear. To be perfectly truthful, my first thought was in fact noting how old that couch is, and how likely it is that since you so ungracefully jumped onto it, you now certainly need a bath.
Well, maybe you don't like the sofa. It is indeed old, and you're right to point that out. It doesn't in the slightest bother me. I'll be sure it's tea for you by the end of the week. Surely you must be able to admire the charming nature of this painting.
The painting is a waste of space, Virginia. It looks as though it would fall apart at any moment. Unless you forget the horrid designs it contains. The look on all their faces is so vulgar. A child would have pieced this together. In fact, they likely would have done a better job.
Well, I suppose they are quite plain. Yes, I guess you're right. But surely you can have nothing negative to say at the table. It stands, is it not? And a table is necessary in every household, so it cannot be deemed a waste of space.
The table is delicate, child. It looks as though it struggle and squeal a great deal only when holding the days of new purchases and jewelry. What use do I have for a table that cannot handle the bare minimum of my needs?
Guess you speak correctly. After all, it does look as though it can even hold my weight, and I am excessively petite, am I not?
Yes, dear, you're perfectly sized for a lady of your age and status.
But, Mother, what do you say about the wall? I cannot deny that the couch is old, and yes, I'm dirty from sitting on it. Nor can I say that a painting is a particularly good use of space. And it's clear to anyone with eyes that a table which holds barely but its own weight is practically useless. But a wall which is as elegantly and beautifully decorated as this one must be an essential addition to the house. Why, start, I will not be sitting on it, and it must be important holding the roof up over our heads. And I can say for certain you'll not be putting in the day's purchases on it, so it need not hold any extra weight. Surely you can have no negative or derogatory comments about this wall.
Virginia, the wall stands out too much. It screams for you to look at it. You yourself got distracted by it not 5 seconds ago, and I simply cannot allow that to happen again. The wall will need to be painted over, and soon.
Yes, Mother, I understand. You're exceptionally wise, and I will always trust your judgment.
An excellent observation, dear. And a very clever choice. You see, I never doubted my mother, neither her advice nor her opinion, and I strongly suggest you do the same.
You know, I don't remember much about grandmother at
Your
all.
grandmother is not important right now. What is important is to find out what is taking your indolent siblings so long with the luggage. I'll tell you this, Virginia, you cannot trust those foolish siblings with the most trifling tasks. They always find a way to make a failure out of it, and inevitably themselves.
You speak correctly. You know, just the other day I asked them to play a game of hide and go seek. Now she goes outside the hiding room. Very
Yes, dear, it's very nice. I think it best I go escort into the door myself. Virginia, please do not break anything while I'm gone.
Virginia, I see you've already made yourself rather at home.
Oh, absolutely, Father. I'm sure that these walls will be my home now for some time.
That's excellent to hear, Virginia. I knew for certain you would. You know, I must say, when I first saw this chase for sale, my very first thought was how fast you'd fall in love with it. Admittedly, the second was how fast your mother would learn to despise it.
Unfortunately, very quickly. She made that perfectly clear just before you walked in.
Yes, she made it abundantly obvious to me as well, strutting past me accompanied by a long with breast aside. But it's no matter. I'm sure she'll adapt. England is an enchanting place, after all. Perhaps in the end she'll grow to admire it.
I find that very doubtful.
Yes, as do I. But a man can hope, and hope I will. I intend to stay in England for quite some time, and approaching over this fact while she's in this rather unsavory mood is a very unpleasant thought.
Father, you must remember that she believes this to be a business trip. To last no longer than a few months. It seems clear that all of us at your work does not require long trips, so unless you were to get a more local job, an idea which Mother would find perfectly preposterous, I'm afraid we'd have no choice to stay longer. Besides, I think it perfectly ludicrous if I came downstairs one day to find starting an occupation in beekeeping or something of the other.
Worry not. I have no intention whatsoever of becoming neither a beekeeper, a beetle keeper, or anything of the kind. I will simply continue my investments. Your mother will simply think I'm working and I'm doing nothing at all. There are always up-and-coming businesses around England being an easy excuse for us to stay.
That well may be, but it would not be a difficult argument to say that there are just as many, perhaps more businesses in America. I think someone even as stupid as Edie could win that argument.
You may think so, but if given that argument, then I can assure you that English businesses are sure to be more profitable.
Of course, Father. Let us see how far you get with that argument.
Thank you, Virginia. Your evident sarcastic tone has been noted.
You're quite welcome. I do hope you convince her to like it here, though. I love it so much already, I'd be most displeased if she forced us to go. The England's just so enchanting. I mean, look at this clock. Isn't it just beautiful, Father?
It is indeed exquisite. That clock is yours to look after, Virginia. Please take good care of it. It belonged to Lady Canterville's grandfather, and she expressed a great desire to be kept in good condition.
Of course. I'll be sure to clean it, dust it, why even shine it. It'll look pristine. It'll be the centerpiece of the room.
Excellent. I'm sure Lady Canterville will be most pleased.
You misunderstand, Father. I'm not doing it for Lady Canterville. I'm doing it for the clock itself. Something this magnificent in design demands the utmost care, and I'd only be too happy to provide it.
Of course, dear. I'm sure the clock will be very pleased. Ah, Miss Umney, what a pleasure.
Pleasure to see you too, Mr. Otis.
Minister, please, Miss Umney.
My mistake, Minister. Terribly sorry.
Your apology is accepted. Virginia, dear, this is our new housemaid, Miss Umney. I've been reliably informed she is most hard-working, sir. Anything you need, you may ask her.
It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Umney. I look forward to us living together. I'm sure we'll get along splendidly. Though there is one matter I need to make quite clear, and I do hope you don't think me rude for saying so, but this clock is mine to take care of and mine only. I do hope this won't be a pressing issue for you.
Not at all, Miss Otis, but pray, if you do need my help, do not hesitate to ask.
Thank you, miss. But please, call me Virginia. I'd much prefer we knew each other on a more intimate level, and I find the idea of someone living in my own house and not calling me by my own name most distasteful.
As you like, Virginia. Anything I can do for you today, Minister? A cup of tea, perhaps?
Oh, no, I don't think she'll have one right now, thank you.
I would adore a cup of tea, miss, if it's not too much trouble.
Of course not, it would be my pleasure. Would you have the sugar?
Oh, no, thank you. I'll be sure to take away from the flavour. I will never understand how those foolish children really amuse themselves with such trivial tasks. I've asked them to bring the luggage in 3 times, and each time they go to do it, I find one of them is attempting feverishly to delay the other. It is simply a waste of time, effort, and intelligence. I'm afraid we'll never have our belongings come through that door. Well, knowing then the luggage will most likely arrive through the upstairs window.
I highly doubt that, Virginia. I'm sure it'll turn up any moment now.
I find that highly improbable now. I'm almost certain those scoundrels will be out there until nightfall.
Well, that's not long.
Tomorrow. Well, if that is to be the case, then at least they have the provisions to last the night. And I hate the idea of them being out there for that long with nothing to eat or drink. You're indeed correct, dear. However, they're buried deep in one of the bags, and if those two are incapable of bringing them in here, then there's almost no chance of them getting inside of it. Excuse me, who in the name of all that is good in the world is this, Hiram?
This, dear, is Mrs. Umney.
Oh! This is Mrs. Umney. I'm sorry, dear, but I do not think you've thought to mention Mrs. Umney before. In fact, I have absolutely no recollection of the name. As of the current moment, my mind is calculating the many possibilities as to whom Mrs. Umney is. None of them are pleasant. And I assure you, dear husband of mine, that so much one of them happens to be true, you will surely live to regret that fact.
Allow me to clear the confusion at once before you decide I have a few appendages too many. Miss Umney here is our new housemaid. I've been told she's a most lovely person. Why, she's already become best of friends with Virginia, has she not?
Miss Umney is very nice, Mother. She's already made me this tea, and it is quite delicious.
She's made you tea, has she, dear? How kind. However, Hiram,
One fact fails to escape me. We already have several houseworkers of our own. What sensible reason could you have come up with in that feeble mind of yours as to why we need another?
The others are getting rather old, and I hate to say it, but I think we need to consider branching out to new additions to the workforce. I decided to take the initiative and found Miss Umney here, an exceptional choice, I must say.
I do not like this in the slightest. To be honest, Mother, I did see Henry bending over to pick something up the other day, and he did take his time with it. It pains me to admit it. He seems sure that his time with us should soon come to an end.
well, it may be true that Henry's been with us for some time now. It feels like rather a weak excuse to go and search for Mrs. Umney here. I suppose she doesn't come for free, either.
Miss Umney is paid an annual sum of £30. I feel that's reasonable and already negotiated it.
£30? That is a preposterous amount of money. We pay Henry only a little over that. He's been with us for 15 years, Hiram.
That is exactly where you're correct, my dear. We pay Henry £35 a year, and if we are to remove him, which I feel we should do as soon as possible, then we are saving our money. And if it is for a better job, then I don't see what the problem is. I don't understand why you are so against the idea. If it is because you've become attached to Henry due to, I don't know, say, sentimentality, well, I would feel inclined to point out the ridiculousness in that.
I understand your argument, Hiram. However, you should know that I do not like this, and I completely detest the idea. However, I shall go along with it, as long as the extra £5 goes to a new dress for me.
Can you doubt that, darling?
In that case, I'll go along with this foolish idea.
Thank you, Mrs. Otis.
Washington, my boy,
Yes, Father?
do you have any idea what it's taken those insolent siblings of yours so long?
Yeah, we haven't the slightest, and I must admit I'm getting rather famished.
I've told you both. Those two are being terrible nightmares for each other. If one of them's made it to the door, the other's sure to reel them back in some way.
I regret to say that Mother is right. Unfortunately, it is unlikely that neither they nor the luggage will be here anytime soon.
For heaven's sake. Virginia, would you please see and talk some sense into them?
Of course, Father. As I've already stated, I am quite famished. I'll be sure to consistently remind them of the fact until they arrive at the door.
She loves it here, Lucrezia. Perhaps we should consider staying a little longer. A permanent change of scenery can only help her to grow.
It was merely a phase, dear. I'm sure if we took her to Australia, she'd adore it first. This case is no different. She'll see the flaws eventually, and soon be begging for America.
Well, just let hope that happens before Father's business trip is over. It will be a dreadful task to tell her she is to live here in her current mood.
You're quite wise, Washington.
I will tell her. She'll get over it. As soon as we reach Boston, I imagine.
Got you! No, you didn't, Carol. You merely touched the air. Surely you felt something on your shoulder.
Are you trying to play me a fool and convince me it was a fly?
No. What I felt on my shoulder was merely a movement of the air, a breeze, if you will.
Caused by my hand. So you admit that you felt something on your shoulder, and thus my hand was close enough to say that you really have indeed been.
Oh, that is not fair in the slightest.
Please, sister of mine, stop being so immature and just admit that you're wrong. You have been got, and have been for the last 100 games that we've played. In fact, you are so got that I do not now think there is any way for you to unget yourself.
What? That is not in the rules. Surely I can unget myself.
It is in the rules, Edie, you just have not read them thoroughly.
Oh, I cannot read them. There is not a book at all containing the rules. In fact, what I learned of this game I learned from you.
Well, perhaps if you had devoted more attention to my no doubt excellent description of the rules, you would have tried to unget yourself earlier.
That is so ridiculous, Carol. Your rules are always ludicrous, and every time they just work in your favor.
I'm just telling you how to play the game. It's not my fault you're evidently bad at it. Oh, I do hate to be the one to inform you that you've lost, little sister, but you have. Now accept it.
All right. Very well, I admit it. But I just have to say that I find this game childish, and if anything, I'm glad it's over.
The only reason you think that is because you lost.
Oh, it is not!
It's so! Just admit that you're a sore loser. I would say perhaps even the sorest of losers. Well, at least you have that in your favor. Something you're finally decent. I dare say even good at.
Oh, that is just so ridiculous,
Oh,
Carol!
no, it is not. It is as clear as crystal to
No,
see.
it is not!
Yes,
That is enough! From the pair of you.
Foolish children. Why, in the name of all that is holy in Boston and all of God's Queen America, they did things to have two Carlson twins?
It was not a part of my grand scheme, I must admit, Washington. But who could say no to such treasures as these?
They've been nothing but trouble, Father. For the entire journey, I've had to listen to the bickering, the juvenile games, and they make two jokes at each other. It is just proportions, and quite honestly, I'm crying. And they are still here, awake and as bright as a rooster on a warm summer's morning.
Well, what do you expect from me to do about it, boy? Send them to bed and expect them to sleep? There's little doubt they would sleep, and we should be grateful for that. For if they did, they'd probably be up again in the earliest hours of the morning. And there, my dear boy, would be your rooster crow.
No, just not exactly that. It sounds a very unpleasant ordeal. I was thinking something more effective. You may not be aware of it, Father, but I've heard that there are places out there.
Oh, no, Father, whatever he is about to suggest, I assure you that we certainly do not need it.
Quiet now, Carol. Please continue, Washington. Call me intrigued.
Well, Father, I've heard that they are entirely open to getting individuals, of which I'm sure that these two would fit the criteria. And what what they do.
Oh,
you
we
see,
don't need
is
them. It's simply excessive, isn't it, Edie?
Absolutely, it's completely superfluous.
Superfluous, yes, that's what I said.
I see. So, you won't be needing to attend one of these establishments? I have no doubt you would sleep much better after.
No,
Not at all. As you know, we are very well behaved.
Yes, so very well behaved.
Well, the thing I've always noticed about well-behaved children
exclusive to very well-behaved children, I'd say.
is that they would never think of disturbing their dear old father and older brother after an exhausting meal. Wouldn't you say that was the case with exceptionally well-behaved children, Washington?
I most certainly would, Father.
Of course, Father, of course. I was just explaining that to Edie here, and you know how she is. It's the cathedral walls, I'd say.
Oh, that is so not true.
Oh, it isn't, you know.
Oh, it is not.
Yes, it is.
Enough! Go to your room, the pair of you. I've had quite enough bickering, squabbling, and childish arguments for one day.
You lost a grand total of 2 minutes and 35 seconds up from the usual 2 minutes and 15 seconds? Are the little nightmares finally growing on you, dear?
No, I thought I'd give them a little more time to adjust, and, if they didn't, they'd be waking me up again and ruining my work hours. You see, my infinite wisdom knows no bounds.
I highly doubt 20 seconds will have much of an effect on that, dear.
It felt like much, much more.
Alas, it was not. But regardless of time, who am I to question your infinitely vacuous wisdom?
Well, you question most of my other perfectly good qualities. You may as well question that, too.
I did all for the betterment of your character, dear. I wouldn't want you to make a fool of yourself now, would I? Besides, there's the additional bonus of making my life slightly more bearable.
You know, my dear, I must say, I never make a fool of myself. At least I can't recall having done so for a great many years.
Perhaps your memory is another one of your perfectly good qualities.
You know, I must say, darling, you're quite right. My memory never fails me, and I'm quite proud of that fact.
Memory is such a bore. While I admit that it is useful for tasks like mathematical equations or things of a similar matter, truly I cannot think what other use it has. Except to wake one at an ungodly hour to remind them of excruciating and painful past experiences, and frankly, what good is that?
My primary duty as of late has been to make a mockery of your father, Washington. And that is indeed most useful.
If I may, brother, I should point out the fact that you clearly have a great deal left to learn. Memory allows us to look into the past and both learn and become inspired by it. Take this house as a prime candidate, for example. Every nook, every cranny, every scratch, a perfectly chiseled statuette describes a piece of its history. Why, if you were to look at this painting, you could almost picture the artist himself standing here. How, over here, he detailed their expressions with the lightest of strokes. But over here, it's clear that he struggled a little bit. Maybe even slipped halfway through. Does it not interest you at all to picture such things?
It does not. Indeed, not in the slightest, and I believe you to be quite childish and certainly oblivious to the living world surrounding you for doing so. There is all that matters, and that is what we see here today, in the present. I have little interest at all in the adventures or mishaps the artist went through. In fact, I feel sorry for those that picture sad things for each other. They clearly have nothing better to do.
That is most unfortunate, Washington, given that story itself created this piece. But your sister is quite right about the place. England is positively brimming with history, and, well, you may become far more cultured individually if you pay it some of your attention.
Your father is exaggerating a great deal. This place may be pretty, but that is all it is, or at least all that matters.
That's not true, Mother. In fact, this place has so much history, I'm considering writing a book on it. I was speaking to Mrs. Omni yesterday.
Mrs. Omni, the housekeeper?
Yes. And she actually said that this is home to a very old ghost, supposedly from the 16th century.
A ghost?
Yes. He's the most intriguing individual. Apparently he sent 2 housemates into hysterics last time just by looking at them. Mrs. Omni is rather frightened of him, but if anything, that just excites me to meet him more.
Virginia, I highly doubt you'll ever meet this ghost. Not without a large amount of make-believe and a larger glass of wine at your side.
Virginia, Mrs. Omni, the housekeeper we so kindly allowed to keep her job here, told you that the house was haunted by a ghost. Not only do I find that incredibly and silly, but I find it quite foolish and quite a failure to possibly having raised a child, naive and credulous enough, to believe the tales of a nonsensical old proletariat, let alone tell the parents of them.
Mother, the way she told the story made it sound very plausible. Why, you need only take a glimpse at the house's history. You'll see her story is indeed well-founded.
Once again, sister, you're dwelling far too long in the past when it has no bearing on your life whatsoever.
But if you do not wish to educate yourself in such matters, then just ask anyone who stayed in the house for more than a few nights. They'll surely tell you what I'm telling you now. A ghost roams these halls at night, and I certainly want to meet him.
Virginia, though it pains me to tell you so and break your heart, there is no possibility of there being a ghost here. Ghosts do not exist, and I am certain of this, for I've yet to see one in America. And if there isn't one in America, then there certainly isn't going to be one in an old forgotten manor house in England.
Mother, I know you don't believe me, and I very much doubt you believe the story told by Mrs. Umney, but it doesn't change the fact that I remain entranced by it. The very idea of living with someone who died in the most horrific way is just so enticing.
A most horrific way, dear?
Yes, Father. It truly was an awful ordeal, one that he's still traumatized to by this day. And seeing that it happened quite some time ago, it really must have been a very distressing ordeal. I mean, I myself find that I'm able to forget frightful occasions in most of the week's time. I mean, take that spider last Friday, for instance. It was horrible at the time, but now I've practically forgotten about it.
Though, to be frank, sister, you haven't exactly died, have you?
Well, no, but it did happen over 300 years ago, so you'd expect him to be over it by now.
As it simply seems you won't get over this new story of yours, then please enlighten us. What was this most ghastly death that our ghost friend went through?
Well, it would seem that our ghostly associate died due to a series of unfortunate coincidences. Simon awoke one morning, he decided to have a bath. Should that be the only thing he did that day, which, unknowingly for him, it was. But the water was not running, so he remained adamant he'd have a bath of some kind. So to that end, he decided to make use of the pond, for he owned it. So why should only the animals get to use it and not him? However, what he'd forgotten, however, was that the Friday before, while awfully intoxicated, he promised to Admiral Hexworth to visit him to chase to hunt for ducks. The Admiral, upon noticing the pond, perhaps naturally mistook Sir Simon's buttocks protruding up the water that of a duck's. And perhaps instinctively, he took a shot. It took 3 shots for him to go down, and after that, Sir Simon de Canterville of Canterville Chase was dead. It is worth noting, however, that the Admiral was exceedingly generous with the Cantervilles after that. But he was found out 3 weeks later dead in his room with a duck atop his chest, which most thought quite peculiar.
An intriguing tale, dear, but I highly doubt it'll have any bearing on our lives whatsoever. Now, I shall have a drink and retire to bed, for I'm tired of hearing nonsense and tales for one day. Where is Mrs. Umney?
Terribly sorry, Mrs. Otis. I just...
Enough! I do not want to hear any more of your excuses or your ludicrous stories. I would like a tea with 1 sugar and make it quick. Wait, what is that? Something's been spilled over there.
Yes, madam, blood has been spilt on that spot.
Blood? How horrid! I do not at all care for bloodstains in my living room. It must be removed at once.
It is the blood of Lady Catherine de Canterville, who was killed by her own husband, Sir Simon de Canterville, in 1575. Sir Simon survived her 9 years and then died suddenly under the most gruesome circumstances.
I'm well aware of your preposterous circumstances. My daughter Virginia has chosen so kindly to enlighten us with your story and share your details with us. However, it is not explained why you, the resident housekeeper, have failed your duty of cleaning it up.
The bloodstain has been abided by tourists and others. Surely it cannot be removed. Not only for the memory and the history behind it, it will not go, as a matter of fact. Ever since with the ghost, I presume. I have tried everything I know of on this spot, to no avail. It simply will not come off.
It is all nonsense. The Pinkerton Saint and stay over and park on the tunnel will clean it up in no time. I know Pinkerton will do it.
What a monstrous climate. I guess the old country is so overpopulated they have not enough decent weather for everybody.
Hiram, what are we supposed to do with a woman who faints? I knew I was right from the very start.
Shut to her like breakages. She won't faint after that.
I warned you, Mr. Otis. Lady Canterville warned you of the ghost that haunts these halls. I have seen things that would make any Christian's hair stand on end, and many, many a night I've not closed my eyes in sleep for the awful things that are done here.
Miss Umney, you've had quite a fall. Perhaps you should consider retiring to bed.
Yes. You do look rather weary.
Perhaps that's a wise decision.
No. It's been rather a long day, and as I won't be getting that tea, I think I shall retire to bed too. And if if this nonsense hoax of a ghost is true now, it's certainly a good time for a show, wouldn't it? Good night, all.
My dear sir, I really must insist on you oiling those chains. And have brought you for that purpose a small. It is said to be completely efficacious upon one application, and there are several testimonials to that effect from the wrapper from some of the most eminent divines. I should leave it for you here upon the table, and I'd happy to provide you with more should you require it.
The audacity! Never before in my entire life of being dead have I had to deal with such disrespect. Such low regard for the supernatural and occult. On no occasion in my life, death, or even the brief space of time in between, have I had to deal with impudence of this caliber. It's perfectly preposterous that these new pretentious and conceited inhabitants think it reasonable, or even acceptable, to offer me lubricant for my chains. As a matter of fact, Mr. Hiram B. Otis, the sound of my chains is very soothing to me. I can assure you, sir, that I most certainly will not be applying your lubricant to them, no matter how many testimonials or praises or even recommendations from our Lord himself are inscribed on its papers. In age, or in fact, several, I have never met, nor feared I would meet such audacious and repulsive people. Admittedly, I feared they existed. They simply needed to keep the world in balance. But I expected them to live in the far corners of the world. And I certainly expected them to stay there. Alas, here we are, with these insufferable people, in my home, as if they are the only inhabitants here. Which is entirely false. I have been an inhabitant of this chase for over 300 years, and I do not plan on packing up my bags and relocating to want any old mansion. Heaven forbid. A house. Although there is always the Stutfield residence. No, it is entirely out of the question. I live here. I was born here, raised here, died here, and I have haunted here for long enough that one felt scare should not drive me off to any old place. Instead, I will have to learn to coexist with them. Although I do think it's quite unfair and incredibly unbearable. I know of no ghost who has ever been treated in this manner. No. I'm afraid scaring them off is really the only option. And while that may seem like no easy task for any old ghost, I, of course, am Sir Simon de Canterville, the ghost of Canterville Manor, having done many a brilliant fright, from a headless horseman to things that go bump in the night. For me to list them all simply off the top of my head would be absurd. There are that many. But I want you to know that I, Sir Simon, always come prepared. Let's see. Ah, yes. There was the 4 housemaids who ran off in hysterics when I merely grinned at them through the curtains. It was the Dowager Duchess who I frightened into a fit. Ah, yes. Dear old Madame de Tremoylock, who, having awoken early one morning to see a skeleton seated in an armchair just by the fire, reading her diary, was confined to her bed for 6 weeks with an attack of brain fever. In fact, upon her recovery, she became reconciled to the church. I admit I'm rather proud of that one. Or there was that fateful night that the wicked Lord Canterville was found choking in his dressing room with the Knave of Hearts halfway down his throat. And he confessed, just before he died, that he had cheated Charles James Fox out of £50,000 at Crockford's by means of that very card. In fact, it says here that he swore the ghost had made him do it. In truth, I did. I really am a most brilliant ghost, and I surely will not be beaten by some obnoxious, full of themselves, pompous Americans. I will give them the fright of their lives, and the whole family will curse the day they threw pillows at me, or offered me lubricant, or chased me around my own manor. Oh, God.
Good morning, Father. You know, I had the strangest of dreams last night.
Didn't involve ghosts, perchance?
Yes, it did, actually. How do you know?
Just a mere suspicion. You said so yourself last night that there may well be something going on at this new home of ours, and I do believe, though it falls against all of my better judgment, that, well, you may be onto something.
Father, please do not mock me, for that is rude. Are you sure you're beginning to believe one of my stories?
Of course not, my dear. It's just the subjects of your previous tales have never woken me up and pacing up and down the stairs like a madman. The events that occurred late last night were certainly bizarre, to say the very least.
Seems to have caused you quite the trauma. Will you be all right, Father? I'd hate for you to end up in the local mental asylum like those 2 housemaids. Indeed, what would Mother think?
Your mother would think a great many things. One of those being that she always knew I'd end up there in the end. But alas, do not fear, dear. You're not going to find me wandering the streets shouting lunacy. I only fear whether I'll ever only... Oh, God, you even know I'm tired from my speech. I just wonder if I'm ever going to be able to good night's sleep again. I do wish I'd told them that when we spoke.
So, you met the ghost?
Virginia, I was in a state of being rudely awakened from a very pleasant dream. Whomever or whatever I spoke to last night does not matter, so long as they don't repeat the heinous act.
Oh my goodness, you did meet him. What was he like? Was he young and handsome like he would have been in his youth, or running away as he's very old and no doubt his ghost body knows it?
As I stated already, I was very much of the mind to go back to bed rather than studying the intricate details of his face for your questioning this morning.
That's a shame. I'd very much like to form some sort of picture of him for my book.
I'm awfully sorry to disappoint. Maybe next time I'll bring a pen and paper.
Oh, could you? That would be most helpful. I've even got some questions here that you could ask him.
Why, this is perfect. I see you've already put down most of the most important questions. For example, does your hair still grow? And if so, does it look very much like a woolly mammoth?
I have not seen the ghost myself. If his hair is long enough that you can't see him under it, then don't ask him. In fact, you may even cause him some distress if you do.
I can state with some fair degree of certainty now that his hair was not particularly long. He managed easily enough to walk along the corridor without tripping over it, so I imagine that it isn't of an excessive length. Would you like for me to ask if the hairdresser and see if they can book you in?
Yes, please, Father, that would be fantastic. There's so much I could learn from a ghost hairdresser. I could ask if they have a special tool for cutting the hair of dead people. Or maybe they're ghosts themselves. There's surely only a ghost who cut another ghost's hair.
I imagine that they had cut the hair of the dead body, of course. If it stands to reason that the body can grow hair, then the apparition can too.
Do you truly think so?
Without a doubt.
I'm not convinced. Though I believe in ghosts, the idea of corpses being reanimated and being given some form of second life is most disturbing.
After all, I did find Frankenstein very unconvincing.
It is good to know that there's a line. Anyhow, that leads me on to your next question. Is it tiring to be a ghost, having to haunt without fail all of the time?
I admit that question needs some expanding upon. What I wish to know is if he has to haunt people, or if he simply does it for fun. Maybe there's a yearly quota he has to fulfill in order to remain being a ghost.
I very much doubt that, dear, but I'll be sure to ask him for this book of yours the next time I see him. Surely in 500 years' time he does not see himself continuing to haunt these old halls. He knows the estate well enough by now. I'd easily picture him as an excellent steward.
Father, do you think me a fool? A ghost definitely would not want to be a steward. If anything, a steward would want to be a ghost. If you're not going to take it seriously, then I'll ask someone else who will.
Of course I'm taking it seriously, my sweets. Anyhow, while I'm interrogating that poor soul, what do you propose you'll be doing?
I imagine I'll be sleeping in my room. Ghosts don't tend to appear during the day, and Mother always says, if you don't get a good night's sleep, then what are you to do the next day except for waste it during the previous night's work?
Wise as ever, your mother. I'll be sure to remind her of that the next time she sends me out to deal with the rattling chains of a stupid hour in the morning.
Of course, I'd much rather deal with it myself, but I know Mother would not be happy, and I've never displeased her before, nor do I plan to start doing so now.
You should start soon. You simply have no idea what you're missing. Good morning, darling. How was your sleep? Quiet and peaceful as ever, I trust.
Mostly. Though, I do remember waking up around 2 a.m. and have the slightest idea around why. I vaguely remember some sort of clattering, but I can't for the life of me think what it could have been.
That would be the chains, dear. They were clattering and clunking all through the early hours. Yes, I believe the entire household heard it. Virginia here had a restless night too, and I put it down to that.
Oh, I admit I had a strange dream. I never said I was restless, nor did I hear any strange noises throughout the night.
In that case, I envy you a great deal. Were I to somehow slept through the commotion, there's little doubt in my mind your mother would still have woken me.
I do not remember much of the events of last night, Hiram. But if I did send you down to deal with the disturbance, I was likely in the right mind to do so. There could have been a terribly traumatic ordeal waiting for me downstairs, and it's certainly more favorable to me that you went through it rather than me.
Of course, my darling. I wouldn't want you to have to go through what I went through last night. Needing to get out of bed and go all the way downstairs can be incredibly bothersome at such early hours, and it is not at all something I wish I'd put you through.
That is excellent to hear from you, as I do remember a great deal of complaining from yourself last night. Nevertheless, it seems like you've had a change of heart, clearly for the better, but what was it that disturbed us at such an unholy hour, and will we need to worry about it in the nights to come?
Oh, it was, merely the household ghost. Likely the very same that Virginia was telling us of last night. Whether it will continue to haunt us on future nights is a question I cannot answer. I would imagine so purely due to the fact that, well, it is a ghost, and if a ghost could have an occupation, then I imagine that, scaring someone would be at the top of their agenda.
Hiram, I did not marry you for your sense of humor, for I find it quite grotesque. Did you have any idea how insane you sound? Surely you don't expect me to believe the story that you've come up with clearly with the help of Virginia.
My dear, you can think me quite delirious, but that does not change the fact that a dead person is living in these halls with us.
I can handle a dead person. Why, most of the places in England, those worth mentioning at least, have some sort of burial in them. It's when my own husband thinks them alive again.
I do not merely think him alive again. I have met the ghost and am acutely aware of his status of being well and truly living and indeed walking about.
Hiram, I'll admit, I do not always find you perfectly sound mind, but this is a new extreme I don't think I'm prepared for, or exactly ready for. Surely, you do not expect me to believe this. I already get these stories from Virginia, and I want to start hearing them from my husband.
Mother, this is the first I've heard of the event. Though I am most excited by it. It's very rare that any of my stories actually come true, so the fact that I'm right about this is nothing short of thrilling.
Virginia, just because your father believes it to be true does not mean it isn't all true. That fact applies to everything, so do be sure to remember that.
My dear, though I understand this can be difficult for us all to accept, I truly did see some sort of apparition with my very own eyes. There is little doubt that I too am surprised. None of us expected any supernatural occurrences while we were here.
Well, except for Mrs. Omni.
Apart from Mrs. Omni, no one
Did
foresaw...
Lady Canterville not warn you too, Father? Mrs. Omni said that she did, and you said something about the laws of nature, whatever. But she had no idea at all what you meant.
Yes, Lady Canterville did inform me. And had I not had a brief discussion with a being of the paranormal nature in the early hours of the morning, I would no doubt be of the exact same opinion.
Are you sure you saw a ghost? It was particularly dark and very late. Perhaps you dreamt it up.
I cannot be certain of what I saw, but I am well aware of the fact that there was someone or something in this very room with me in the early hours of the morning.
Have you considered the possibility of the theft? Perhaps we had a break-in. Oh my, Hiram, I'd look into this as a matter of urgency. I'd even consider contacting the local authorities. Have you secured all the doors and windows? Have you checked out things? Why do I keep you around if you cannot handle such simple matters? We have a break-in. The first thing you do is assume we have a ghost.
Lucrezia, my darling wife, though I am not a thief or any of the like myself, I still feel as though I'd be better than this absurd and quite honestly laughable thief you've come up with. What thief would enter a manor, rattling and clanking chains as he went about his thieving, steal nothing, and pour lubricant on our table before he left? I think your breaking idea may even be more preposterous than a ghost.
Mother, maybe you should get some more rest. This news must come as quite a shock to you, and, well, when a lady such as ourselves is in shock, she deserves as much rest as she deems necessary, whether it be a lazy afternoon or an entire winter. Said so to me just last Friday.
It's as if I've woken up in a new household. Perhaps you did not dream of the events of last night, Hiram, but if that is the case, then I am sure to be dreaming now. I shall return to bed, and when I wake, I do hope that this was all a senseless nightmare, or for the two of you to have given up on this nonsense hoax.
Oh dear, do not forget your tea. I worked very tirelessly on making it. I knew she'd never believe me. I doubt the mother of yours would ever believe in him, even if he was standing right in front of her muttering ghostly curses or whatever it is they do in their spare time. It's no matter. It's probably better this way. If she did think our otherworldly neighbor was real, she would likely hate the house all the more for it.
You're probably correct. So, I am intrigued. How did you deal with Simon?
Well, I provided him with a small bottle of the Tammany Rising Sun lubricator. For his chains, of course, though it did very little, I'm afraid. I heard the chains not long again after. He must have tried using it, as most of it remains here on the table, but clearly he had a great difficulty.
Well, that's distressing for you, for I imagine that you'll hear it again tonight. I imagine I'll be mostly unaffected, as was the case last night.
I'm also aware of that fact, Virginia, but it is a real shame. I'd very much like to get along with our new ghost friend. He has been in the house far longer than any of us, so I imagine it quite rude to expect him to change his ways. But I'm afraid to say that if he's not able to use a Rising Sun lubricator, or worse, chooses not to, then we shall have to take his chains from him. It's practically impossible to sleep at night with such a racket going on outside the bedroom.
Good morning to the pair of you. I trust you had a good night's sleep. Father unfortunately did not, so you must forgive him for being a little out of character this morning.
We are well aware of how Father's sleep was rudely awakened, are we not, Evie?
We most certainly are. It was a peculiar night indeed.
That it was, Evie. In fact, we met with the very being that caused the disturbance, did we not?
We certainly did. We threw a pillow right at his head. Unfortunately, it did miss, but he is a ghost after all, so it likely just went straight through him.
No, not that time. I mean, when we actually met him.
Not sure I ever actually did get to meet him, Carol, though we did spend a great deal of time chasing him around.
Yes, and then we eventually caught him.
We did? I can't recall us catching him at all. I do remember you finally giving up.
Yes, we caught him, Edie. He must have been asleep or something of the like, as you usually are when I'm at my most heroic.
It's hardly a heroic feat to catch ghosts in his own home. I imagine he scared the poor soul half to death, if that's at all possible. Well, if you did catch our paranormal neighbour, then where is he?
He's a ghost, of course. I had him all tied up ready to show everyone at breakfast, yet by first light there was not left but a rope.
I don't remember there being any rope this morning.
But of course I'd already tidied it up by the time you awoke, hadn't I? Nevertheless, last night I still caught him, and I'll catch him again tonight and every other night, and that will teach him from coming back from the dead. And besides, we certainly don't want him wandering our home at night. He truly is the most terrifying ghost I have ever witnessed.
Have you seen many ghosts in your life, Carol?
Of course I have. I've seen many things that would make your very spine shiver, sister.
I had no idea you'd met ghosts before. Perhaps you could introduce me. I'd love to meet a ghost myself.
That is out of the question. They are far too dangerous for the likes of you, Virginia. And although I'd love the opportunity to introduce you, the risks are simply too great, and I can never forgive myself should anything happen. I also doubt Mother and Father would forgive me either, so I'm afraid if you wish to meet a ghost, you must find one yourself.
Well, that's a shame. Nevertheless, I'll endeavour to meet our ghostly neighbour here, and maybe even ask him about his capture by your very hand.
I wouldn't do that. Not at all, would you, Edie?
I don't see the harm in it. He didn't seem like much of a threat. He was running away from us after all.
You are clearly looking at a very different ghost. This ghost is a haunting beast. One that you read about in books that keep you awake with dread for nights on end. He has the reddest of eyes and fangs that droop down just below his chin. And not only that, his body is so big that he had to kneel down just to get out of that door. It was a terrifying sight that I doubt I'll soon forget.
How very odd. The ghost last night seemed most gaunt and
And not only is he petrifying to witness, he's mighty tough to fight too. The very fearsome fellow we now live with. Just last night, he almost ripped my left arm open. But of course it's not there now. It's a ghost come. And everyone knows they disappear by the next morning.
That is enough of the petty theatrics, Carol. We are also aware that you did not catch or likely even could get a glimpse of Sir Canterville last night, so please refrain from coming with any more nonsense regarding the matter this morning. You said, sir, yourself not 5 minutes ago that you know of my lack of sleep, which has left me quite exhausted and certainly too fatigued to deal with any more of your foolish rants.
I'm awfully sorry, Father. I had no idea you were so tired. Or perhaps a cup of tea could boost your spirits.
No, thank you. I've just managed to finish mine, and 1 cup of tea a day is a perfectly acceptable amount. However, what I do find unacceptable is your treatment of the ghost last night. Considering the length of time he's been in the house with us, I do not think it is all polite to chase him around and throw pillows at him.
You should have seen it.
That's enough of that! I'm afraid to say that, whether you like it or not, we have already moved into a house that's already occupied. I am not suggesting we move again. The paperwork would be enormous, and I do not wish to inform your mother of another move for a great deal of time. So, we must learn to live with this ghost. Now that that business is settled, I should get to work and checking doors and windows. Your mother will be adamant that the break-in has taken place, and no doubt will become an entirely new argument by the time she awakes. Virginia, you will accompany me.
Why, Father? I'd much rather stay here and have another cup of tea than search doors and windows all morning, for it would surely take that long. Have you any idea how many there are to check? It's truly a substantial amount.
I am all too aware of how we need to check, and that is why I've chosen to not do it alone. We shall start now, and with little luck, we'll be finished in time for supper.
Edie, I am most upset we failed to catch the ghost last night.
Yeah, but it was not for the lack of trying. We chased him around for so many hours. I never knew a house could have so many empty and miserable hallways.
You better get used to it, sister. You're in England now. And everything here is completely miserable.
Quite right. We've only been here a day, and I already feel so out of sorts. Do you think this painting here was set in England?
Of course it is. Look at their faces. Not one of them is enjoying themselves.
Well, maybe Mother is right, and we should move back to America as soon as we get the opportunity.
Father and Virginia wouldn't have it, Edie. You know very well of that fact. Unfortunately, whether we like it or not, we are stuck in England for the foreseeable future. And so we must entertain ourselves as the English do.
You mean to say we should catch the ghost, don't you?
Precisely.
Do you think all the English have ghosts about their houses?
I have no doubt about that fact, little sister.
Older?
Only by a mere few seconds, Edie. And I'm clearly more mature than you, so there was little point in arguing that you were older. I evidently have the older mind. Anyhow, as I was saying before you rudely interrupted me, I happen to know that every house, manor, or even stable in England has a ghost or spirit of some sort.
And what exactly has made you come to this conclusion?
There are two reasons. The first is an obvious one that even our friends back in America know. England is very, very old. Even you cannot deny that. And so all of its houses must be very old. By that logic, all of its buildings are likely to have been around long enough to have caught something, even if it's just the ghost of a local stray dog.
And the second?
The second is based on our very own research that we have so diligently conducted here in England. This is the only house here that we have ever been in, at least for a substantial amount of time. And it also happens to have its very own ghost. Therefore, every house in England that we have ever been in has had a ghost, and thus, by careful calculation, every house in England has a ghost.
I cannot fault your logic, though it is a revelation. Just last night, I had no idea what a ghost was, let alone expect England to be entirely covered in them.
It is a bold conclusion, but I've no doubt that I'm right. And you should certainly take your time to process the information. But first, we must deal with the immediate issue at hand. Getting rid of our ghost. We might be living in England, but if they expect us to go along with their insane traditions, such as living alongside a supernatural being, I'm afraid they'll be sorely surprised. And Father clearly cannot stand a ghost himself. Oh, so how tired he was this morning.
He was without a doubt very tired. I thought he would collapse at any moment.
Precisely, but I doubt he has the heart to get rid of a paranormal visitor, so unfortunately that task falls to us.
Well, I don't see it being much of a problem. Considering the ghost's performance last night, I imagine he'll be out by Christmas at the earliest.
Edie, you simpleton. Gone by tonight.
Oh, I see. And how exactly do you see this happening, dear sister?
Simple, is it not? Removing the house's apparition will likely be the easiest task that we've ever done. We only need to formulate a decent enough plan.
Oh, and how much of this plan have you formulated already?
Admittedly, I'm still working on some of it, but I'll have all the details ready for you very soon.
Oh, how soon? You are aware that tonight isn't particularly far away. In fact, it's fairly fast approaching. Do you have any idea of how to start this plan? Do you have any foundation of it whatsoever?
Of course I do. And I had a couple of ideas. Well, my first was to pour a bottle of Verna's ginger ale all over the floor to make it slip.
Allow me to interrupt. Your plan is to spill a refreshing drink all over the floor, thus wasting a perfectly good bottle of Verna's ginger ale while also making a huge mess of the lovely wood in the hall. What would Mother think?
Yes? Well, that is, of course, why I abandoned this plan, Edie. You did not let me finish. How rude.
I'm terribly sorry. It shall not happen again. You said you had two ideas. Did I ask what the other is?
Of course, but you have to bear in mind this is still a work in process. I still have to refine smaller details. Now, I remember hearing somewhere that ghosts are most afraid of fire. And I happen to know that Father keeps a box of old riding bills and matches on the top of the closet just upstairs for lighting candles and such.
Allow me to interrupt again. I'm afraid that this plan will not be the best of your ideas. You know how precious Father gets about those matches. It's as if the invention of fire is likely to go out the minute the match does. Not to mention that you shall certainly burn down the house if you get a hold of them. And then Virginia would be most displeased, and upsetting your sister is never wise.
I'm glad you finally learned that lesson. But you are right, and as I said, both of these plans are just concepts for now.
I shall think a little more and come back to you as soon as I have something more tangible.
Oh dear God, no.
Good morning, brother. I do hope it is as pleasant a morning for you as it is for Carol and I. You see, we plan to catch the ghost tonight. That's if Carol comes up with a decent enough plan. You see, so far they've been fairly unorthodox.
You haven't been listening to Virginia's foolish ideas, have you?
Not at all. In fact, we saw the ghost with our very own eyes. I wouldn't mention it to Carol, however, though she seems most upset at the fact that we failed to catch him.
That is entirely false. Last night was merely a test. And in fact, it's what you do with all ghosts. The very first step whenever you enter a new home that happens to be haunted should be to scare it and assert a new dominance over the home. If anything, I'm ashamed the rest of the family didn't know to do this and hadn't the slightest intention to take part. Surely the ghost will now think that I'm the new owner of this house. I admit that I am happy to take
Enough.
silence.
I do not need to hear any more of this nonsense.
Oh, I'm sorry, brother. Am I beginning to bore you?
Quite the opposite. In fact, I would much prefer to be bored than a target of your incessant and relentless rumblings about your activities with this so-called ghost in the early hours of the morning.
I see. Well, I'd be more than happy to move on to a different topic. Perhaps we could discuss the latest novel by Lyman Frank Baum. I find all of his books most enticing, don't you?
I'm afraid I've not read it. It is a children's book after all, and they are best left for, what, children?
Oh, Washington, please. It is very good, even if it is, as you say, a children's book. I'm almost certain it would teach your thick skull a few things.
Excuse me?
I didn't say anything. Merely that it's a good novel and you should at least consider reading it. But if you do not wish to discuss books, then what else is there? We could discuss the stain on the wall just here.
I'm sorry.
The stain on the wall just here.
You must be mistaken, Carol. I feel it was last night with pink and something stain.
Well, I'm afraid it's still there. Although it appears to be orange now. Did you use Paragon detergent too?
Of course I used the Bible detergent. What sort of a fool do you take me for?
Merely that I was incapable.
This makes no sense whatsoever. Just last night I was with this stain and it was as good as new.
Well, it's morning now, so there's better light, and with any luck, you'll actually be able to finish the job this time. Good morning, Mother.
Good morning, Carol. Goodness, what on earth is Washington doing? It isn't a matter of far more important things to do with. Edie, you wouldn't happen to be aware of the whereabouts of your father now, would you? I've had the most awful idea about how the burglar caught in. It's truly horrendous, and I must speak to him at once.
Father,
And I believe they went to go check the windows and doors, Mother.
Those fools, I can't find anything there.
Edie. Do you know? I think I may have just had the perfect idea about how to get rid of our ghost.
Slightest smidge of green just there. Perfect. A masterpiece, if I do say so myself. Belonged to my wife, whom we best not discuss. 300 years ago. You may be somewhat confused. I am a ghost, after all, and one would assume that once we surpass the moment of our death, we are in fact free of our monotonous duties. This, however, is a foolish misconception about the afterlife, one I recommend you rid yourself of promptly. It's considered quite rude to all spectral folks of used-to-be-living variety. The dead, whether we went peacefully, violently, or gruesomely, as was my case, must still brush our teeth each morning, as well as maintain our attire, and, of course, maintain our household. You see, it's very easy to complain and grumble about pests. Most households have somewhat of a very nasty critter in their walls, whether it be rats, bugs, anything of the like. They're almost always unpleasant. And if you are to find someone who does not find them unpleasant, in fact, quite the contrary, I recommend you distance yourself from them as quickly as possible. Ghosts, however, have to deal with the most unpleasant, most dislikable, most disruptive and destructive of all pests. the living. Of course, I don't have any issues with the living as a species. I used to be one, in fact. But I do think it's rather unfair when they decide to make changes to this very house. Every now and then, one of the living residents will have an idea. They want to make a change or redesign. Perhaps that rug should move a little to the left, or that old suit of mail doesn't need to be there anymore, or perhaps we should purchase some comfortable new chairs, which to this day is the one choice I eventually agreed with. Not that it matters. What is all the more infuriating is that I am never consulted on these decisions. I'm merely informed by loud hammering at an ungodly hour. 3 in the afternoon is indeed the perfect time for a nap, but the living cannot comprehend this. Or the lack of a place for me to sit, which is all the more disrespectful given I have lived here the longest. This brings me on to our dear friend Washington, the bold young man with a bottle of stain remover. Of course, I have no quarrel with him cleaning. In fact, it would appear he's rather efficient at it. My issue with Washington is that he has very little respect for this bloodstain, the great bloodstain, where my wife was murdered in cold blood by me, of all people. And again, something that's left unsaid. Stories have been written about this stain. Admittedly, I'm yet to publish them, but stories have indeed been written. And then from all the way over in America comes our good friend Washington with his Pinkerton's bloody stain remover and ruins it all! I have devised quite the devilish plan for our Americans. To begin, I will enact my revenge on poor Washington Otis. First, I will make my way into his room. And upon entry, I will begin jiggling at the foot of his bed. This is usually enough to deal with the faint of heart most easily, but I sense this will not be enough for our overzealous boy from Boston, with his potions and concoctions. To ensure he is sufficiently terrified, I will wait. And upon his awakening, I will stab myself in the throat 3 times to the haunting sound of low music! Having reduced the reckless and foolhardy youth to a condition of abject terror, I will move on to Mr. Hiram Otis. An arrogant and self-important man who had the audacity to offer me oil along with his wife. I have a most splendid solution for these two. First, I will place a clammy hand on Mrs. Otis's forehead, and while the trembling Mr. Otis is stricken with a great deal of fear, I will whisper into his ear the awful secrets of the carnal house. With regard to little Virginia in the very next room, I'm yet to make up my mind. I do not remember her insulting me at any point. In fact, there's very little suggesting she bears me any ill will. She is pretty and gentle. I suppose a few hollow groans from her wardrobe should suffice. Or if that fails to wake her, I could grabble at the counterpane with palsy twitching fingers. Yes, that would certainly do the job. This brings me on to the very worst of the family. The scum at the bottom of the barrel. The twins. Those good-for-nothing, obnoxious, dreadful little brats. Certain to teach those two a lesson tonight. The first thing to be done, of course, is to sit upon their chests, so as to produce the stifling sensation of nightmare. Then, as their beds are quite close together, I will stand just between them, in the form of a green, icy cold corpse, until they are paralyzed with fear. Then, for the big finale, the grand climax, I will throw off the winding sheet and crawl around the room with bleached white bones and one rolling eyeball in the character of Dumb Daniel or the Suicide Skeleton! I have no doubt that by the first light of dawn, our Americans will be screaming and writhing in sheer horror as they rush to distance themselves from the manor. In fact, I find it rather unlikely that they'll have any chance to pack their bags. Rather unfortunate, really. I do loathe to leave this place in a mess. But it is a small price to pay to punish those insolent reprobates. This brings me back to the night of the Honourable George Horton fright, after which the doctor had attributed him with permanent idiocy. It appears I've spoken long enough. Even the weather wishes for this night of terror to commence. A ghost? Have you come for me? What a horrifying spectre! Could only come straight from a madman's dream!
Yes, Lady Canterville, you did indeed hear me correctly. 3 whole weeks. Happy surprise indeed. You know, I must admit, I believe you have gone a great deal longer than it has. I am well aware of that fact, Canterville, and you certainly need not remind me of it. Yes, well, when something abruptly decides to wake one up in a dreadful hour in the morning, one's opinion of it can change dramatically. I do, in fact, remember you telling me. However, it is not entirely absurd to be in disbelief when such things are mentioned. Yes, well, a man can be wrong from time to time. It only helps to greater the character and make them seem all the more trustworthy when they are proven right. It continues to be a very perfectly sound point, Canterville, so there's no need to go silly on me. Fine, okay. We shall move on from the topic if we continue to be ridiculous about this entire situation. The house? Oh, the house is lovely. I'm ever so pleased you decided to leave that plot behind. Virginia adores it. If you'd like to come and visit, we'd be happy to have the company. What would be best for you? Excellent. I'll make sure to bring the necessary arrangements and... Oh goodness, you're honestly concerned about that old ghost again? I've already told you it hasn't been seen for 3 weeks. What I think made it go? It could have been anything, Canterville. Well, you know what England's like. Maybe it decided to move away. It got quite chilly. You haven't noticed anything odd, have you? Maybe it decided to follow the family line. No? Well, perhaps not then. Or, you know, you could just be getting set up, given how the haunts can be devilishly intricate. I'd wager about 3.5, maybe 4 weeks to set up the necessary arrangements for their scares. Yes. Oh, good afternoon, darling. I'm afraid I'll have to go, Canterville. Canterville? How strange. I believe she's hung up.
Afternoon, dear. And how is Lady Canterville?
Well, she's doing quite well, actually. She just informed me about a delightful picnic she had with Mr. Canterville.
How lovely. Perhaps she'd be taking advice from him. I surely enjoy picnics. It'd be good for the children. They haven't done much but bicker since arriving in England.
Of course, my dear. We have a big enough chase out there that we've yet to explore, and we should certainly start soon. I can hear the weather can awful here in the winter.
The weather can be dreadful in the winter. Surely, dear husband of mine cannot be considering this a summer. It's been consistently raining over the last 2 weeks. Can we say it'll get more horrid and miserable?
I'm afraid afraid so.
God, I loathe this country. I hate everything about it. The weather, the constantly downtrodden and distasteful people, the fact that there is never, ever anything going on, save going for a walk in the woods, which always ends in my shoes getting soaked at best or completely ruined at worst. But what I hate most is the fact that we are still here, even after 3 weeks. There hasn't been the slightest, slimmest, nor smallest mention of us ever leaving. Are we stuck here for an entirety, Hiram? Did you really hate America so much to take its most miserable country imaginable?
Of course not. Why, we could have gone to Australia then. That would have been most unpleasant.
At least the weather in Australia would be anywhere near as awful as here. Why must we stay here? It's not been a pleasant stay for any of us. Washington speaks of moving back to America by himself, for heaven's sake. It's taking a toll on all of us, dear, and I mean, even you have been having difficulty doing your work.
Precisely. My work just isn't finished yet. I only need a little more
Time? You've had plenty of that here. And anyone with or without a functioning brain can tell that you do not need to be here to do it. In fact, since coming to England, I've seen considerably less work being done from you than if you were at home in your office. Instead, all I see you doing is constant trips out to the field and long discussions with Virginia about the history of this morbid country. It's almost as if you like this country, which is a foolish idea indeed, considering even its indigenous people don't. Then there is the other matter. If you're not out praising the countryside, then all I see you doing is a great deal of sleeping, dozing, or in some sort of slumber somewhere in the house.
Now, dear, a man is entitled to sleep, especially and most chiefly when you have a great deal of work to get done.
All of us are entitled to sleep, Hiram, but not so much it becomes clear to everyone that your children are more productive than you. If I were to give this great deal of work to Washington, the only person other than me capable of getting anything done, I have no doubt would be home by next week.
You cannot give it to Washington. He wouldn't have the slightest idea what to do.
I suggest you get working on it considerably faster than you have been. You risk it becoming painfully obvious to everyone that you are treating this work trip as more of a holiday. Please, do not insult me. I'm well aware of what's going on.
Very well. I best get back to work. The day is almost up after all.
A splendid idea, dear. Last, in peace.
Good morning, Mother. How are you today? I trust you're much better than Father. I just passed him. He was in such bad mood.
It is such a shame. All I'm trying most to do is keep him on track. That man rarely ever listens to my advice. What was he doing, Virginia?
Well, as I passed him, he mentioned that he was terribly tired enough to get some sleep.
I see. Hiram, dear, how's the work going?
Oh, very well, darling. Very well indeed.
Excellent. You wouldn't be happy to take yet a not-so-well-deserved nap?
Oh, of course not.
Good, as I'm on your way to your office now with a few things. If I were not married to that man for my own misfortune, I have no doubt would get nothing done. Nevertheless, how are you, Virginia? I'm sure you're excited to see Cecil, am I right?
You absolutely are, Mother. I can't wait for him to get here. Why, just last time he brought me my favorite flowers. Roses. It's as if he knew. I, of course, told him that they were not my favorite. I couldn't allow for him to be correct right away.
Very good.
I do hope he brings me roses again. He should, for he should know that I was lying. A very great man would know, and I do believe Cecil to be a very great man indeed.
He may be a great man, dear, but allow me to offer you some advice.
Please do, Mother.
Do not, under any circumstances, marry him. A great man who is married can quickly become a mediocre and, in the worst cases, a boring man. I would not want you to be stuck with a boring man. The idea is perfectly sickening.
Well, that's a shame, Mother, for I truly believe I may marry Cecil one day. He's so kind, you see. Why, every time I'm with him, I feel as though my heart might just burst from excitement, and if he were to ask me to marry him, I fear my heart would burst from excitement before I could even say yes, and how tragic that would be.
Did you not hear a word of what I just said? I think it best you sever this relationship sooner rather than later, given this newfound information of your heart exploding. That will not be pleasant for any of us, least of all you, dear.
Mother, that's most unfair. I truly adore Cecil, and I have no intention to deny his offer of marriage should he give it to me. Which he definitely should, for I'm growing impatient.
Your way, dear, but to not have the audacity to come to me in 10 years' time and tell me how you're dying of boredom in the mediocrity of your life. I'll simply have no time for it. I'll be too busy strangling your father.
So, the next day then?
Of course. I'm sure I'll have all the time in the world for you if you've been planning Cecil's untimely demise.
Who's on town with Elias? I do hope you don't mean me. It tends to be bad for one's health when others just start planning their demise. And I do not need to be concerning myself with that by now.
Dear. We were just discussing the unfortunate accident Virginia's new beloved will have.
I assure you that's most unnecessary. He's so kind and loving.
Yes, dear, I'm sure he is. And we can have a conversation in full in around 7 or 8 years.
That certainly is a relief. I must admit, I was a little afraid you meant me.
Clearly. But fortunately for you, in this case anyway, the world does not revolve around yourself. Besides, when we do organize your death, we wouldn't be so unwise to do it in the very living room of the house you live in.
Are you quite sure the world does not revolve around me? I feel I'm certainly a suitable candidate.
If there ever was one.
Which there undeniably is not. No. I'm afraid there's more important people in this world, my child, than yourself.
Preposterous.
Such as Virginia and I.
Virginia? What sort of a ridiculous idea is that? She's well, to be truly frank, she's a practical child. She dreams are the wildest of stories, and then, when she decides to inform us of them, in order grandeur, they're making this last bit of sense. All you need to do is look at the last tale about ghosts in this house, to see that there's proof in that. And you even didn't believe that one, Mother.
Washington, do not be so disrespectful of your sister. I already had no doubt that her imagination will prove to be far more useful to her and the world than whatever it is you do. Merely amble about the house waiting for the next line of jackets from the Brooks Brothers, or perhaps the next breakthrough in research of the horseless carriage.
There is no shame in being interested in what a companies in my own country's making. God knows if this country isn't making any worth my time, so where else am I to look?
I agree wholeheartedly. I despise this country just as much as you. However, it's become quite an obsession of yours. Constantly checking the mail for the next issue of Harper's is not at all a healthy habit to keep.
It is not an obsession, as you call it, and I am perfectly capable of missing an issue. I merely prefer to stay informed. Why, I simply cannot believe this. The lack of respect and appreciation for my very own family.
Look, Mother, we found some more fuel for the fire. It's a new issue of Harper's.
Greetings, mother and sister. How has the day treated you thus far? The day's been going splendidly, thank you for asking. Though I'm not so sure about mother. In truth, she seems slightly distressed.
My day has been as miserable as all the others. In fact, I haven't had what you consider a good day for quite some time. But it is no matter. We shall be back home in Boston soon, hopefully, and I can go back to my luxurious life. I have quite a thing going on over there, and I'm sure this senseless excursion to England won't get in the way of it.
Mother, was your life truly so splendid back in America? Though it must pain me to admit it, you did not seem entirely happy with the state of things there either.
Are you suggesting I'm simply being cynical for the sake of being cynical? That would be preposterous. No. Only someone as naive as yourself could come up with something so elementary for a far more complicated issue. I'm not a cynic or anything of the like. I merely despise the world and a great deal of things in it. Therefore, I feel they should know, and who better to tell them than me? Is that such a crime?
No, Mother, that's not
Precisely, I knew.
But it cannot be a fun way to live. Surely it sounds quite miserable.
And it's not something I can afford. It takes a great deal of effort, and in the end, after all the hard work, it's barely a reward. All joy and merriment ever accomplished is constant reminders of how happy you used to be it 10 minutes ago or 10 years ago. I'm perfectly done with fun and merriment. May it never take my life again.
Well, I do hope you change your mind one day, Mother, for that does not seem at all a fun way to live. I mean, I'm of the firm opinion that joy and merriment are very important to one's lifestyle. They're the reason for places like beaches and theaters. And after all, they don't make places where people can go to be miserable or forlorn, or if they do, they can't be that popular, for I've never heard of them.
Comes as no surprise to me that you feel that way. You are young, therefore far too naive and optimistic for a life that will only be mediocre at best.
Mother, stop being such a pessimist. I'm very excited for my future. I'm sure it'll be a great deal better than just mediocre.
I do hope for your sake, my dear, that it is. Perhaps your youth is precisely what you need to make it happen. However, I cannot be certain if the same phenomena caused me to marry your father. Nevertheless, it's not entirely unreasonable to suggest you may have better luck with this, what's his name again?
Cecil.
Yes, this Cecil. Let us hope he takes you on better holidays than this dreary and disgusting country in the future.
I'd very much like it if you took me here. There's so much to see and explore and learn, and maybe it's even too much for one person. And I can't think of anything I'd enjoy more than being able to explore it all with someone to hold my hand back for me.
Of course you would. Now, I should check on your father. I've no doubt he's taking a not so well-deserved nap, and I must put a stop to it sooner rather than later. Virginia, won't you accompany me?
Of course, Mother.
I'm doing perfectly fine, thank you. In fact, so far my day has gone splendidly. I've had the pleasure of being told to go away by my loving and doting father, and now I've been ignored by my own mother and sister. Which I feel is most insulting of all, my own sister. She should undoubtedly be looking up to me, has had the audacity to ignore me. Is she not aware that I'm the most promising of all the children this family has produced? Why, she should simply be filling out a notebook every time I speak. Alas, I'm simply too great for them and they will never see it. At least not until I at last get a mansion of my own and inevitably disown them. But that's at least a year or so away, and so until then I must be tormented by this dreadfully boring family, and that scatterbrained full 80 shall remain my only company. And speaking of that moronic sister of mine, where has she gotten to? Surely she should have brought that laughable attempt to a magazine by now. At last, the fool returns to her master. Edie, I must ask, what took you so long?
Why, were you afraid for me?
I was merely afraid I may have to find a suitable replacement for you. Although I had established a pet boon or something of the like would suffice, I came to the obvious conclusion that getting one would take a great deal of time and effort. And both of these, as you know, I do not like to use a lot of.
Of course, as you've always said, those tasks are much better left to me while you do the thinking. Hold on, are you comparing me to a baboon?
But back to the matter at hand, my dear sister. What unintelligent excuse do you have for taking so long to burn that paper? I even had to sit and listen to Mother grumble on about her life. Surely you did not want me to sit through that, did you?
No, of course
Then,
not.
pray tell, where were you?
Well, I was with Washington. He managed to take the book from me, rather easily I might add, but probably shouldn't have. After he took it from me, he went to read it, and I shamefully admit I was just simply too curious and had to take the slightest peek. I was hooked in minutes, and before long, we were reading parts aloud to each other. It was truly exhilarating. You should have been there. I'm sure you would have loved it.
You did all that? Well, I was in here suffering under the harshest of conditions. I even had to spend some time alone, Edie. Can you even imagine how horrifying that must have been for me? No, of course you cannot. You do not have the natural talent for fame that I have, so don't even try to imagine it. Yeah, well, I was attempting to survive these horrific circumstances. You were not rushing to return to my side, but in fact reading aloud from a mundane magazine for adults and bonding with your disgusting older brother. I've never in my life felt more betrayed than this very moment.
I'm terribly sorry, Carl. I had no idea you were in such a difficult situation.
Oh, a difficult situation? That is entirely an understatement. I expected better from you, Edie.
Well, it will not happen again. You can be certain of that.
And better not. Or you will be getting that baboon replacement for me. Nevertheless, it is good to have you back. We must take action on a new and just as important matter. Our ghost. I missed him, and I wish to prank him again.
But you already gave him quite the stir last time. It was such an ingenious scare that he hasn't dared to show his pale face since. Perhaps he believes a new ghost may have taken over.
How preposterous, I'm certain he does not think that. Anyone would know that it was merely a bed curtain held up by a sweeping brush, and I refuse to believe that even if he has been dead for a rather long time, that he wouldn't be able to see it. I'm determined he's in this house somewhere. And I'm determined to get him, even if it's just for one last grand spectacular prank.
Oh, where do you suggest we start looking?
We shall start upstairs and go bedroom by bedroom.
Sweeping brush? Isn't as though someone else evil and horrible has died recently nearby. And if they had, I surely would have known about it, as I would likely have been registered as the cause of death. Only those rascals playing a trick on me. Those insufferable little brats. Simply wandering around my own home, minding my own business, and they decide to fool me. Those good-for-nothing miscreants. I swear, the moment Chanticleer sounds twice his merry horn, that deeds of blood shall be wrought, that these torturous tricks will not go unpunished, and may murder walk abroad this home once more with silent feet. Oh, perdition seize the naughty fowl! It is hopeless if even the cock does not crow for their demise. Hopeless and cruel. It's so unlike the Chanticleer to do so. Indeed, in every book of chivalry I have ever read, the cock always, without a doubt, crows twice when such an oath is used. Oh, how brutally unfair the times have been on me of late. Even now they torture me so. I must admit I am veritably exhausted by it all. I simply cannot fathom why these Americans must be so horrifically horrible to me. Do they not understand that when they see a ghost, they must be fearful of it? I don't expect a great deafening scream each time, although it is nice to see one's excellent work appreciated in full. I would at least expect a few tears to be shed. Even a shiver wouldn't go amiss. There's nothing of the like from these ungrateful tyrants, nary a whimper. How very evil and shameful of them. In fact, they may well be more evil than I. Therefore, when they die, and inevitably become ghosts, I curse them to have a family just as vile as they are. How undignifying is it that I, the ghost of these very hallways, must stoop so low and resort to such degrading methods as applying rising sun lubricator to my chains to merely exist. I used to be a terrifying creature, feared throughout the land for 3 centuries. My name worthy of mention in great halls, such as Parliament. There have many great achievements over the years, from the butler who shot himself in the pantry, to my spectacular debut as Gaunt Gideon, the bloodsucker of Bexley Moor, to the furor I raised on a lovely June evening by simply playing 9 pins with my own bones on the lawn tennis ground. I truly am a national treasure. Verily, how could I become such an embarrassment to myself? Simply because of a family of Americans.
Yes, sir, you can hang your coat right there.
It appears that is my cue to slither back into the shadows of what was once my home.
Thank you, Mrs. Avenue.
One moment. That's the young Duke of Cheshire. I may not be able to overcome these horrid new tenants, but I could certainly terrify, perhaps forever mortify him. I have a history with his family, you see. His grand-uncle, Lord Francis Stilton, once made a bet with Colonel Carberry that he would play dice with the Canterville ghost. I caught on, of course, and the very next day, there he was, lying on the floor of the card room in a helpless, paralytic state. Dear old Francis did live to the ripe old age of 60, but after the event, he was unable to say anything but double sixes. Therefore, it is simply not a possibility for me to turn down this opportunity to show I've surely not lost my influence over the Stiltons. I must prepare, however. Who shall I use? There are so many great options. There's Bloodless Benedict, the vampire monk. Or Reckless Rupert, the headless earl. In fact, yes, Reckless Rupert is indeed the perfect option. I've not appeared in this disguise for over 70 years. Ever since the fiasco with Lady Barbara Modish. I won't give all the details now, for we are short on time, but rest assured that in the end, everyone involved died, so it was a great success. Now, I must prepare.
Lovely. Shall not lie to you, I was quite anxious to visit dear Virginia's home name. You certainly put my mind to rest.
Why, thank you very much, Duke. Though I'm sure it means very little to you what was coming from myself, but you're a most pleasant guest.
Nonsense. I like to hear everyone's opinions. It's refreshing to hear such an honest voice as yours. The opinions expressed of anyone in the aristocracy are very, well, lovely to hear as yours, but they're very rarely true. Instead, they are merely used to leave their conversation partner with a charming memory of them, which I suppose is rather useful if one is looking to run for minister, but it's hardly pleasant.
Such a shame. What a dreadfully depressing way to live. Nevertheless, Lord, it is not often that people wish to hear my opinion. will only pleased with what I have to say, so I must thank you. Such a nice gentleman.
You're indeed too kind, Mrs. Umney.
Please, sir, you need not hear these things from me. I'm all too sure Virginia will shower you with delightful praises. Why, you should forget all about me. She is such a wonderful person. Whenever I get the pleasure of seeing her letters, which is far more often than her family wishes so.
Truly?
Why, yes. Miss Virginia takes pride in being sure to see me every day. Even if it is oftentimes quite random a time in which she shows up, it is always a pleasure to see her. Although, there was that one time, she caught me unawares in my nightgown stealing a biscuit from the kitchen. But we agreed to split the biscuit between us and not mention a word to the others. Such a wonderful person.
Indeed, she is. I wish to marry her one day. She is that lovely. In fact, she's the only one I truly believe whenever she compliments me. Why? I bought her flowers to show her how much I love her. Though, I fear I've made a grave mistake.
How so?
Well, I once again bought her roses, but she's already made it immensely clear that she dislikes roses. She told me so last we met. But what was I to do? I have to bring her flowers is my duty. Why? I even asked to purchase the lilies from the customer before me, but he thought it quite inappropriate. Perhaps he was in a similar situation as I.
See, that is a tragedy. I'm afraid I've not spoken to Miss Virginia on the topic of flowers, so I haven't the slightest idea of her opinion on roses.
She despises them with all her heart. I believe those were her words.
I'm afraid that is the predicament.
Yes, I'm afraid it's hopeless, and it's most unfortunate. But I thought it best to get her flowers of some kind.
Most certainly. You couldn't possibly think of seeing a lady such as her without any flowers. Why, that would be insane and practically suicidal.
Precisely what I thought, Mrs. Umney, so I went with the roses.
The wise choice, young Jew.
Mrs. Umney, you're needed here for a moment.
I'm afraid I must go. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, Duke. I'm sure Miss Virginia will be along shortly.
The pleasure was all mine.
Edie! Why in the name of all that is holy did you make us go through all those rooms upstairs when he's in here all alone?
Oh, well.
So it's time for you offer excuses. Now get him and be quick about it. Hiram, dear, there is yet another burglar in our house.
Yes, darling, I am well aware.
Oh, good.
Oh, my God! I was not sure at all what to expect from their first ride. I certainly was not expecting that. What in God's good name was it?
I'm afraid that was our resident ghost.
Your resident ghost?
Yes. He's been gone for so long, we assumed he'd moved on.
Mr. Otis, you speak as though it is perfectly natural for one to have a resident ghost, as you call it, in their own home. As if it's quite absurd for a family to keep a pet deceased individual in their rooms. Mr. Otis, I must ask, your sound mind, or should I fetch a doctor immediately?
My husband is most certainly not of sound mind. He is remarkably insane, but a doctor will not be necessary. No. I'd almost no doubt have no idea what to do with him anyway. But you are indeed correct about his burglary and ghost theory. It is farcical, so I do wish he'd stop bringing it up. The man you saw was just our burglar. You need not worry, it appears our children are on the case.
You have let your children see to a burglar. Surely you do not trust them to deal with a grown man alone. Do you not fear that they'll get hurt or something worse? Are you not going to interfere?
Oh, absolutely not. They can be rather cruel at times, and I find it fun to just let them be. Besides, if anything, I fear for the burglar's fate. They probably have him strung up by his ears by now, and who am I to interrupt their playtime?
You are their mother, are you not?
Am I? Oh, yes, I am. Oftentimes I find it far easier and definitely more productive to just let them be themselves. I feel it's turned them into delightful individuals, wouldn't you agree, Hiram?
Yes, they are a most delightful pair.
That they are. Hiram, dear, have you finished your tea? If so, that was ever so quick and quite unlike you.
Yes, dear, it's most exquisite.
How odd. You've not liked tea for as long as I've known you, and now you have to finish one in a matter of minutes. Perhaps this disgusting country truly is changing you. And knowing this country, it can't be for the better, so it must be for the worse. Of course, I mean no offense. It's just that your country is truly disgusting.
No, I'm simply getting used to the taste.
How ridiculous. What did you put in it? Whiskey? Or is it infused with some kind of poison that instead of killing you makes you become complacent and miserable, just like the rest of English folks? Again, I mean no offense. It is just that you're not quite miserable.
No, would you please stop? I have simply grown to like the drink.
In that case, would you like me to make you another?
No, thank you.
Are you sure? It would only take a moment.
I am more certain of this than I was when my decision to invest in George Poland's parlor car back in '74. I am indeed very certain.
If that is how you feel, then I shall speak no more of it. However, when I bring you a cup tomorrow, I expect it to be on just as quick, and I'll be watching you with great intent to ensure that it is.
Of course, of course. You know, my dear, you can be quite...
Charming, helpful, pleasant.
All of those things and more, dear, but we had best not get into the others.
Cecil! Oh, you're here so early. How pleasant. I must admit I'm not in the slightest way ready. In fact, my dress is still loose on me. I'll be but a moment, Cecil.
Virginia, darling, there is no need. You look as beautiful as ever. So the sun is so
I believe I would like that cup of tea after all. Would you like to accompany me, dear?
Certainly. Cecil, you're so kind. I must admit I've heard those words before, but to hear them from someone as kind and handsome and charming as yourself is truly delightful. I see you met my parents.
Yes, they are rather odd. I tend to avoid most Americans, as they tend to be strange at the best of times. The worst of times, well, I cannot imagine it, but I'd rather not be there when it happens.
Well, I'm inclined to agree with you about my parents, but certainly not about all Americans. You don't think me on, do you?
Of course not. You're the loveliest, kindest, most...
You brought me roses!
Yes! I'm awfully sorry they were all the shop had.
Nonsense, they're quite lovely.
They are?
Yes, Cecil. Oh, I didn't doubt you for a moment. Here you are. You've grown my favorite flowers.
Your favourite?
Yes, Cecil. You clearly used to. Why are you so shocked? Stop making that ludicrous expression. You look as though you wish to catch a fly. You should know I'll never kiss you again should you succeed. I must put these in my room. I have the perfect spot for them.
Perhaps that's true. Perhaps mine is indeed a hopeless cause. Ever since the day of my death, I've always been certain that the one true cause of mine, the meaning behind my somewhat reincarnated life, so to speak, was to haunt and terrify the lives of those mere mortal beings. Maybe even I was wrong. Perhaps we ghosts are not supposed to have any purpose in our pathetic afterlives. Maybe we merely exist. If we even do exist. Because according to that witch, Mrs. Otis, we most certainly do not. Yes, assuming that... Is it possible that I'm only here for these mortals' amusement? A tale to tell when they grow old. Stop at the play to see a wonderful show performed by yours truly. Truly what I am in the world. You see, I had no prior knowledge of what a ghost was. I'd never met one before. So all I knew is that I had died, rather gruesomely, and yet I still lived. Of course, I've always had quite the skill for imposingly scary costume making, so, well, I thought I could put that to some use. I rarely knew any of the guests who visited either, so giving them a scare was all too easy. In fact, when I did know them, they were almost always disgusting relatives of mine who deserved far worse. But I feel I have made some decent progress in the last 300 years in the fields of hauntings, terrifying mystical phenomena, and things that do indeed go bump in the night. Now, as I hide here under this old sofa that Lady Startup insisted on purchasing, even after much protesting from myself, I can't help but feel like I've made the wrong career choice. I simply cannot fathom why these Americans must be so horrible to me. That even I, the greatest ghost of them all, can't seem to deal with them. Goodness me, even that may be in question. Ever since the day of my death, I have been certain that surely no ghost could match myself. But was I wrong to assume so? Am I not in fact the greatest? Could I not even be the second greatest ghost? No, of course not. I'm certain the very best ghosts would be able to deal with these Americans, yet I have been foiled and tricked at every turn. It's as if I'm being played at my very own game in my very own house. How depressing. In fact, I may well be the very worst ghost of them all to be too scared to walk around my own home. How dreadful the truth could be at times. I cannot bear it.
Goodbye, Cecil. I'm so happy seeing you today. I look forward ever so much to your next visit. I truly adore Cecil. He's such an amazing man. From London all the way to Boston, I do not think it possible for a greater man to exist. I may be so bold as to say, I don't think a greater man than him has ever existed. Well, maybe 1,000 years ago, but that was quite some time ago. It seems so unlikely that it's basically impossible. Just upstairs, he told me in a million different ways how much he loved me. And it must mean that we're truly destined to be together. Doesn't it? And he's just as foolish as any man ought to be. When I told him how much I loved him so, he simply didn't know how to take it. His cheeks were the brightest red, and he opened his mouth as though to say something, which I'm sure would have been most pleasant to hear, but he couldn't get the words out. It was the sweetest thing. Of course, I'll be sure to tease him about it for years to come. I must have gone perfectly mad with love to think Flower is good company. How very amusing.
Ow!
Mr. Ghost, is that you?
I'm afraid so. What is it you want, girl? You come to torment me and throw things at my head and chase me around like your wretched siblings? Or perhaps I'm disturbing your time on the sofa. Would you like me to apply some sort of American special cream to my head to shrink it down so I don't bump it and distract you from your flower again?
No, of course not. I'm not here for any of those things. Unless you need the exercise and would like for someone to chase you around the house. I'm not as fast as my younger siblings, but I can certainly try if you need me to.
No! No, of course not. I've looked as good for 300 centuries. Certainly in no need of exercise. Well, if it isn't the chasing, then it must be the cream. Go on then, put it on.
I'm afraid no such cream exists. If it did, I'd certainly have given it to my sister by now.
You mean to say you're not here to bully me? To punish me for living in my own home? To harass and taunt me? You mean to say you do not want me to wish that I had never died in the first place?
Of course not. Why would you think that? Ever since I met you, I've been nothing but nice to you.
Well, I must admit you're quite right. I'm very sorry. I merely expected you to be like your wretched siblings. They've been awfully horrid to me, and indeed have lowered my opinion on all Americans, so you must understand, I find it very difficult trusting you at all.
Well, you should know, Mr. Ghost, I'm very grateful for your trust.
Oh, please, there's no need for such formalities. Call me Sir Simon. That was my name when I was alive, and given 300 years to contemplate it, I am still of the opinion that it is the perfect fit for myself.
Perfect fit. You must like it a great deal to have stuck with it for so long.
Yes. Well, there was a brief period in the summer of 1753 where I went by the name Roderick. Yeah, eventually I realised it just wasn't for me. Sir Simon is indeed the only option.
Very well, I shall call you Simon.
It's Sir Simon. Please be sure to use my full name.
But this is your full name, not Sir Simon Canterville?
Well, yes, but I try not to associate myself with the Cantervilles these days. They are a gutless bunch. Trust me, for I would know. I'm quite ashamed to see it. Therefore, I only use the name Canterville when signing official documentation, which I rarely do anymore. Or when being invited to weddings, although I find myself attending those uninvited anyways.
Very well. From now until I depart, I shall call you Sir Simon and nothing else. It's a pleasure to meet you, sir.
Yes, indeed it is. No one has had the pleasure of formally meeting me for quite some time, so you should feel truly honoured.
I undoubtedly feel very honoured to meet you. Though, I must admit, these aren't quite the circumstances in which I thought I'd meet a ghost. Do you often spend your days cowering underneath our sofa? If so, perhaps ghosts are more peculiar than I first thought.
No, I do not always cower under my sofa. I used to walk freely through these walls, giving all manner of guests I saw quite the scare. But ever since your loathsome family moved in, I found I've had fewer and fewer places to hide myself away without being disturbed. So I've had to resort to the most disturbing of places, such as under this sofa. But it would appear that not even that is suitable.
Oh, the sofa would be perfectly suitable. Why, you need only stay still, not one of us would know you're there, but surely you'd prefer to sit on the sofa. It's most comfortable, I can assure you.
I'm well aware of how comfortable it is. I used to make use of it as often as I'd liked. It was especially good when I was into this great piece by Longfellow, who I now believe to be the only American I should ever like. Since your family moved in, I've had no hope of using it. You know, they only think of themselves, and even they are not that likeable. So by now, anyone would expect them to be thinking of someone else.
Unfortunately, I must agree with you about my family. Even I struggle to be around them all at once. But in small and manageable amounts, they can be truly pleasant. Why, if you only took the time to get to know them, I'm sure that you'd find that
I am
they're...
a ghost, dear girl. A man on a much higher plane of existence than the likes of you and your family. I do not have the luxury of getting to know my guests. Not because I cannot communicate with them. I just find them perfectly horrid. I have no intention of getting to know any of your family. I simply wish you would all just leave me alone. You've stayed here quite long enough.
You cannot possibly hate us all that much. Though we may be unbearable to you not taking the time to get to know us, so in fact, you're in no place to judge. Indeed, from this conversation alone, I could say you're just as unbearable as my family can be. Though I did find you cowering underneath the sofa, so I'll forgive you, for I imagine you must be at least a little distressed.
Your imagination is closer to the truth than you may think. I'm ashamed to admit it.
I'm so sorry, Sir Simon. If it helps, my sister will be going away to the city of London.
Those rotten scoundrels will be leaving! Oh, this is excellent news! Perhaps even better than the day I found I could walk through walls. That was a good day. I spent the entire morning just waving hello to all of the guests through their own bedroom doors.
They will be returning again shortly. In fact, they'll only be gone for a few weeks. But in that time, when they're gone, you'll be free to wander the hallways as you wish, and so long as you do not disturb Father's sleep, no one will even know that you're there. And then, once they're back, they'll surely have forgotten all about you, so long as you behave yourself, no one will bother you.
So long as I behave myself? It's as if I'm some court jester you have here, or a misbehaving mongrel. I've been an inhabitant of this chase since any of you were children. It is absurd, you asking me to behave myself. Quite absurd. I must rattle my chains and groan through keyholes and walk about at night. That's got to be reason for existing.
That's no reason for existing at all. And you know you have been quite horrible. You know, Mrs. Umney told us on the first day that we moved in how you killed your own wife. And that is not at all a nice thing to do.
Okay, well, I quite admit it, but that was a purely family matter. That concerned no one else.
Very wrong to kill anyone.
Oh, I hate the cheap severity of abstract ethics. My wife was very plain. She never had my ruffs properly starched, and she knew nothing about cookery. Besides, none of that matters, for it's all over now. And I don't think it was very nice of her brothers to starve me to death, even if I did kill her.
Starve you to death. But that's almost nothing like what Mrs. Umney said when we spoke at length on the matter of your death. Are you sure you're not remembering it correctly? It has been some time.
I think I'm perfectly capable of remembering my own death. It's something one tends not to forget. But tell me, are the new stories truly so different? Goodness me, in 300 years has the tale of my death been twisted so much that there are no similarities left?
Well, unless you were starved to death while you bathed in a pond, I'm afraid not.
While I bathed in a pond? That's ridiculous! It's practically insulting! I should feel disgusted. I do, in fact. But I suppose it's of no surprise that those wicked siblings decided to disguise the truth of the matter. I know I would do the same. I'm just disappointed my mindless nephews and nieces believed that. They should have known I surely wasn't a clumsy individual. I'd never have made such foolish mistakes.
Of course not. Oh, Mr. Ghost, I mean, Sir Simon, I'm so sorry for you. Being starved by those horrible men has been a truly traumatic experience. Are you hungry? I have a sandwich, I think, in my case. Would you like it?
No. Thank you. But I don't eat anything anymore. I'm above such things. It's very kind of you, all the same. You know, you're a lot nicer than the rest of your rude, vulgar, horrible, dishonest family.
Stop. It's you who's rude and horrid and vulgar. As for dishonesty, I know you stole my piece to refurbish out that ridiculous blood stain. First you took all my reds, including the vermilion. Then you took all my chrome yellows and emerald green, so I couldn't paint any more sunset scenes. Which meant all I was left with was Chinese white and indigo blue, and that meant all I could paint were moonlight scenes. Which is not all easy to paint, not even that nice to look at. I never told on you, though. The whole thing was most ridiculous. Who'd ever heard of emerald green blood?
Well, really, what was I to do? It's a very difficult thing to get real blood nowadays. And besides, your brother began it all with his Paragon detergent, so I saw no reason why I shouldn't have your paints. As for colour, that's a matter of taste. The Cantervilles have very blue blood, for instance. The bluest in all of England. But I know you Americans don't care for things of this kind.
You know nothing of the sort. And the best thing you can do is emigrate to improve your mind. I thought it would only be too happy to help you get across. Though there is quite a high tax on spirits of every kind at the moment. But surely once you're there, you would have no issue at all, since all of the officers are Democrats. And then once you're there, you're sure to be a great success. Wait, I know thousands of people would pay hundreds of pounds to have a grandfather. Surely they'd pay much more to have their own ghost.
I don't think I should like America.
We are all rather rude and hard to be around, are we not?
Well, yes. At least most of you are.
I've had enough of this. You're being perfectly childish. Good day, Sir Simon.
No, please, wait, Miss Virginia. I am so very unhappy. I simply don't know what to do. I wish so much to go to sleep, but I cannot.
That's not a problem at all. It's very hard sometimes to even stay awake, especially in church. But there's never any question about the problem of being able to sleep. Why, even babies can do it, and they're not at all clever.
I'm afraid it's not at all that simple. You see, I have no candle to blow out, no bed to sleep in. And as for the matter of churches, I've been conclusively forbidden ever since the incident in 1649. A matter which I shall not go into.
Oh, no, please do, sir. I'd love to hear one of your tales.
I had no idea you were so interested. No one else around here ever has been. In fact, my only company for the last 300 years, ever since the kite Lady Annabeth had it installed, has been the folks in this here painting. Although, after 3 centuries, they are yet to say a single word back. They're not at all the most talkative bunch. In fact, I'm obliged to say the truth of the matter that we're all perfectly plain.
Sir Simon, as much as I'm fascinated by your discussions with inanimate objects, I'd much rather hear your tales of your horrific haunts. Indeed, why do so many people shiver upon the hearing of Canterville Chase? For, I mean, you're not that terrifying as a person. Even though you are quite peculiar, are dead after all. But are we not all odd in our own way?
Very well. Very well. I will tell you the story of my fright of dear Lady Stutfield. The year was 1752. It was Friday the 14th. I tried my best to align the scare for Friday the 13th, but I'd missed my opportunity the last month due to a terrible cold. And another scare wasn't, Friday the 13th wasn't due for another few months, so no, it was warm on a summer's eve, which was most peculiar, as I, as advised to all ghosts worthy of mention, tend to do our devilish scares at night. But Lady Stutfield was the most frightful woman. Even blowing a wisp of air in her face would almost cause her to faint. So I fancied a challenge. I would see to Our Lady in the light of day. At 5 o'clock, I visited her. Yet all I did was place a hand on her shoulder. Unfortunately for her, at that very moment, the sun hit my hand, burning down a mark of my 5 fingers quite permanently. Although it was unintended, I'm rather proud of the fact that from that day forward, she was forced to wear a black velvet band to cover it up. My only regret is that it did not last for long. She drowned herself in the carp pond at the end of King's Walk, not 2 weeks later.
Truly incredible. Though also quite horrific.
Well, it's my duty, dear girl. I cannot simply let people come into my home and then leave again without experiencing a great deal of trauma. That's why it's so infuriating I cannot just at all seem to get to your family. Indeed, quite embarrassing.
Well, I'm sure you'll find a way to scare us all off at some point. I must go, Sir Simon, but I would very much like to hear another of your stories someday.
Oh, I'm afraid not. I'm not really in the mood for telling stories anymore. I'm very sorry. Perhaps you could read my book when it's finished. Although I'm yet to find a publisher. Apparently my date of birth was far too long ago. Deceased does not qualify on her ludicrous form.
Well, perhaps I could get it published for you on your behalf. My mother introduced me to lots of publishers over in America. She believes I have quite a vivid imagination, so introduced me for what she calls future prospects. But perhaps this is precisely what she intended.
I doubt very much your mother intended on you meeting the apparition of a 300-year-old dead person and then publishing his book.
You're likely correct.
I tend to be.
But that doesn't change the fact that I would love to help you with it. Does it have a name?
Sir Simon. A post-mortem autobiography.
It's intriguing. I look forward to reading it ever so much. Think of how much I could learn about the culture of the dead.
Yes, and I am sure you would learn a great deal. But I'm not giving this away for free. No. I shall exchange it for information. Yes, that would suffice perfectly.
Of course, I'd be more than happy to help you. But you've been around a lot longer than I have. What could I possibly know that you don't already?
A great many things, Virginia. A great many things.
Carol! I am verily exhausted from all this now. I very much admit that you have won. Finally, I was becoming desperately bored. Carol? I know you're just trying to scare me. And I just want to say that it will not work. I'm not afraid of anything, not snakes, not spiders, not even the dark, and I'm most certainly not afraid of you. So you best come out right now and just save yourself from all of the embarrassment. Carol?
Ooh.
To the individual named Nikola Tesla, to aid in his research of alternating current. All of it. Every last cent. Even the shares in George Poland's parlor car. Yes, it says so right there at the bottom. How could this have happened? Evie! Evie! You must listen to your father, for if he is to speak to you, which I most certainly did, then you should make an effort to answer. I think you're being quite rude.
Good morning, Father. I trust that you've had a pleasant morning.
It is not at all good morning, Virginia. It is not at all good morning indeed. In fact, this may be one of the worst mornings of them all. It may even be worse than that morning I woke up to your mother with a large bucket of water in her hand.
That was also this morning, Father.
It was? Oh, goodness me, yes, it was. I'm afraid I'm not in the calmest of minds, but given what's on that piece of paper, I have a certainly valid right not to be.
Hereby, I, Mr. Hiram B. Otis, transfer all of my funds to the individual named Nikola Tesla to aid him in his research of alternating currents. Father, is this not the same Nikola Tesla you've always hated?
The very same.
Well, that is most distressing for you. Would you like me to make you a cup of tea?
No! I don't want quite a cup of tea. I loathe it. I detest how it's practically water with extra steps, and I do hate it. No one else in this horrid country seems to be aware of that. We should set off at once. Well, I may be able to cover at least some of my funds back in America if they go to that tyrant.
Father, do not think you're being a little bit overdramatic. Why, I'd be just as happy as any of us to leave England. It certainly is a miserable place after all, but are you sure we've seen everything here there is to witness? There will likely be a storm tonight, and there's still a great deal of rain to see. Certainly you cannot turn your nose up at that opportunity.
Virginia, ensure that your bag's packed and you're ready to leave by this afternoon.
Of course, Father. May I take this book with me? It would be a lovely memento of our time here in England.
Of course. Take whatever you want. You can take that clock for all I care. So long as you're on a boat to America by this afternoon.
I said it's likely to rain tonight, which is so rare for England, but you simply cannot miss it.
No! It is a tragedy. Julia thought something so it could never happen. Listen to me. Let your great country. How in this godforsaken land are we even supposed to recover from something so dire as this?
Truly, it is most unfortunate. If we get moving, we may be able to recover some of the funds.
Get moving? I'm afraid our hope is not this matter. We cannot do anything but mourn.
What are you speaking of, boy? Nikola Tesla shall not have all of my hard-earned money. If I should mourn for anything, it should my very own son's dignity, which you seem to have forgotten all about.
I am not speaking on the matter of your quite trivial issue, Father. Indeed, this is far more serious. Harper's have stated that they will not be able to release an issue for the next 3 months due to a lack of income. Whatever am I too fond about the latest inventions or innovations?
Well, after father's a large investment, you might as well just check Tesla's new newspaper.
You look perfectly pathetic down there and should be up for giving me my due respect that I very much deserve. This is such an excellent statement. Edie? Oh, goodness me, I've had quite enough of this now and I deserve far better. Get up at once. No! The boats!
Boats? What boats, dear?
The boats have been cancelled!
Why, you've gone quite mad. What with you constantly on the verge of lunacy with you and your outlandish burglar theories? But I did not think it to be today of all days. But merely to appease your insanity, what boats have been cancelled, darling?
All of them! Every boat from London to Boston, Liverpool to Washington, and the whole of San Francisco has been cancelled. Even the smaller ports of Cardiff and Southampton aren't sending any off. If that is the case, then what is the point in the cities? There are I'm only slightly manageable to look at from the very back of the boat that is considerably far away. I'm afraid, Hiram, that I'm going to be stuck here for quite some time. Why don't we take a boat of our own? Why, a small sailing boat could get us back. It would only take a few weeks, tops.
Father, I've just had an amazing idea. What if we took a boat of our own?
All use the exercise and a sailing trip sounds most fun.
While it is certainly not ideal, it's the only option we have. Everyone gather your things. We shall set off at once.
Father, have you gone quite insane? You cannot possibly be considering this. Imagine the living conditions.
I am imagining them in comparison to the prospect of Nikola Tesla spending all of my hard-earned money on another's ridiculous inventions. I have come to the conclusion that I certainly prefer the former. Now please, do consider hurrying it up a little!
Come, get here, sister.
To think, those Americans truly thought they stood a chance against me. Here, in my own manor, no less. How ludicrous my guests can be at times.